as long as I can remember, television, radio, newspapers have all had slogans. I just wrote down a few. Some of these predate many of you. Some of them are fairly recent. Try it, you'll like it. You remember that one? I can't believe I ate the whole thing. That was another one. One that I think really sticks with is plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. And when it's contemporary, the right gold at the right price right away. And then Coca-Cola used to have the pause that refreshes. And now up on the signs that we see on the highway, we've got click it or ticket. Slogans. Why slogans? Well, maybe one reason for them is that people will remember something about slogans. It's kind of a catchy idea, you know. It's an idea that it sticks in our minds. Well, the Bible has, I really hate to call them slogans, but the Bible has some penetrating thoughts. Maybe I like that a little better. The Bible has some penetrating thoughts that really give us words to live by. There are all kinds of motivational seminars and get rich quick things that we run into in our culture, and people will tell you a wide variety of things about how to develop self-esteem, and they've got a lot of stuff like this, you know. The Bible doesn't tell us how to develop self-esteem. The Bible doesn't tell us what business to go in to be successful, but it lays down some great and wonderful statements that have to do with life, the way life really is, and the way life needs to be. And one of the great things about it is that when we learn to apply these things, self-esteem comes to us. Not because we're selfish, not because we're trying to gain it for ourselves, but instead because we're trying to please God. We're trying to do what's right. And there's something built into this whole idea of the things that I'm going to talk about this morning from these slogans, if you want to call them that make life so meaningful for us that, hey, these things work. These things are good. And these things are from God. Of course, one of the greatest is, and one of the things that we really, I guess, know more about, or we've heard more than anything else, is the golden rule. We've paraphrased it: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. It reads a little bit differently from that in the New Testament. It says, "As you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them." Well, paraphrased, more forceful in our culture right here. Do unto others. Close relationships with husbands and wives, parents and children, close relationships, close relationships that have to do with not just how do we get along today, how do we get along tonight, but how do we learn to get along all the time. One of the terrible things about our culture is that there's so much instant idea. I've got to have fun. When? Now. I've got to be successful. Now. Now, I don't think too much about tomorrow. I'm thinking about today. Well, do unto others as you would have others do unto you is a real good, not today theme, but theme for all time in your life, in my life. Oh, it's been ridiculed. It's been ridiculed. It's been joked about, and people say, "My golden rule is I want to do unto you before you get a chance to do unto me," or maybe do unto others as they do unto you. Or maybe do unto others as others deserve. Now, those are all, we don't say that, but those are all very popular for us. They're very popular in our culture. And yet, they don't work. Or they work temporarily. They work for a little while. And you feel good. I got back. I got vengeance. I told him off. I go away good about it. But then that wears off after a while, after a short while. Stop and think for a moment. It's a wonderful feeling to do something good for somebody and know that they can't repay it. There was a fellow by the name of Lloyd Douglas. I've told some of you this story. You can stand to hear it again. A fellow by the name of Lloyd C. Douglas. He wrote a book called The Magnificent Obsession. And the story of the Magnificent Obsession basically was this. There was a man who was a doctor, and he was rather wealthy. And there was a death because a resuscitator could not be taken over there. And everybody was so sorry for this death that had occurred. And the doctor who had died was wealthy, but then when they began looking at his estate, he was almost broke. And an artist friend of his was talking to someone about this and said, yes, I knew him well, said he gave so much money away. He wrote checks for cash instead of to a person, and he gave them cash. He helped so many people that his bank account just never did grow. Oh, I didn't know that he did that. He said, no, nobody knew it because he never told anybody about what he was doing. And then the clincher came along, and the clincher was this. If you do that, if you learn to do unto others as you would have them do to you, when you learn that, he said you will become obsessed with it, and it will be a magnificent obsession. You see that there is a feeling that comes to us. There is a satisfaction that comes to us in doing things for people when they can't return the favor. Doing things for people anonymously because you're not interested in people knowing what you do. You're interested instead in the people for whom you do it. So the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Have you ever been bawled out? Oh, you did something and somebody really raked you over the coals and just bawled you out, told you how stupid you are, how dumb you are, and how incompetent you are, and so forth and so forth. And you know, if we had a movie of this, I would see myself just shrinking down, and I would become the incredible shrinking person. Well, we don't like to be bawled out. And the Bible talks about this. And he goes right along with this idea of the golden rule. A soft answer turns away wrath. Grievous words stir up anger. Soft answer. No, does it always work? No, that isn't the idea. But the idea is twofold, I think. It works part of the time. It works sometime. It works many times. No, you may give him a soft answer and it doesn't have any effect on him at all. But listen to me now. It has an effect on you. It has an effect on you to give a soft answer to a person who is belligerent, who is rowdy, who is destructive. And so I say to myself, wow, that's the way I would like to be treated. Soft answer. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Relationships. We just had read for us one of my favorite statements in the Bible. it says, bear with each other, or forbear one another in love. You've heard me say this so many times. Bear with each other, forbear one another in love, and forgive each other. That's a great statement. That tells us, hey folks, we need to learn to get along with each other. No, I don't agree with everybody in this audience. I'm quite sure of that. You don't agree with me. I'm quite sure of that. But it isn't how much we agree with each other that we're talking about. It isn't even how much we like each other. We have differences sometimes, and some of these differences are severe. Differences about various things that we do, or places we go, or things we like. Husbands and wives have this. So what do you do about that? Well, Paul says, learn to put up with it. That's kind of a colloquial idea of what he said. Forbear one another in love. I've got to put up with you. You got to put up with me. That's basically what he says right here. Husbands and wives run into that all the time. And one reason that homes break up is because husbands and wives are not willing to forbear one another in love. One of the strengths of homes is when people learn to put up with the faults and the weaknesses and the mistakes of another person. You see, when I learn that, when I find out what it is to put up with that and not to allow that control or that weak behavior to control me, that objectionable thing that person does, I won't let that control me. Instead, I will rise above that. And I learn to put up with it. And you know, that has a drawing power to it. When people realize that another individual is really trying to put up with some things that he or she doesn't like, that stirs up some appreciation in that person. Or it might take a long time to do. But one of the things, you know, that people need to see in us is that, hey, that person is willing to accept the differences of other people, the weaknesses of other people, willing to accept the problems of other people. Oh, I remember a fellow who I found out he had a certain problem, and I thought to myself, boy, am I ever disappointed in him. I thought he was really this, and I found out he's not that way. And then after that same afternoon, I stopped to think of my attitude. And this was many years ago, a real event. I stopped and thought about my attitude, and I thought to myself, he probably is fighting a temptation that I don't happen to have, but he has, and he's fighting it. He's trying to overcome it. He's trying to be a better person. Jack, what are you like? Are you really trying to be a better person? Are you really trying to overcome your temptations? Do you even recognize your temptations, Jack, or are they just kind of oblivious to you? Well, forbear one another in love. My way or the highway. Well, that's a slogan too, isn't it? Not so good. Verse 32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ forgave you. Very, very similar to the statement in Colossians. Well, when I was preparing this lesson, I and looked up that word in the original language, this word that has, has to do with compassion. I found out that there are quite a few words in the Greek language that can be translated by compassion or pity or sympathy. This particular word has an emphasis to it, and the emphasis is learn to suffer together. Learn to suffer together. As a matter of fact, the English word compassion comes from a Latin idea that really expresses that. Come together. And so he says, learn to suffer with each other. I remember when my brother-in-law, died, they were very deeply in love. They had 2 children, did everything together. My sister would be completely lost without him. He had open heart surgery and it never came. He never came to. When he came for the visitation, the body was there in the funeral home and all. She said, I can't stand to go. I just can't go. Some people who were very close to her talked to her about it, and finally she decided to go. It was going to be tough for her. It was going to be very hard for her. You certainly know exactly what I'm talking about. But she suddenly became aware of something, because hundreds of people came to see her at that funeral home over a period of hours. And she saw the reality, the meaning of this. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. And I thought to myself, all through their lives they've had such a wonderful marriage, and they had so many friends who did rejoiced with them when they rejoiced. And now they have come to weep with her while she weeps. You see, compassion, suffering together, learning to share the problems and the heartaches and the troubles, and those things that just tear us apart inside. Learning to share with someone else who is a brother in Christ, who is a friend, who is a family member. Learning to share in this terrible, terrible tragedy. Learning to suffer. Well, you know, it's kind of hard to look at these so-called slogans and say, oh, this one is my favorite. Because it seems like that when you begin thinking about them, oh, wow, that's my favorite. No, that's my favorite. Well, I believe this, I can't really decide what is my favorite. But this one that I want to conclude with is so important. Romans 12. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. Do you see how so many of these things are related to each other? Why, some of the same words are used, and yet the emphasis is just a little bit different. There in the 12th chapter of Romans, Paul had been talking about some very important things. Because we all fall into this. We're all right there. And here's what he begins by saying, do not repay evil for evil. Oh, I wish that wasn't in there. I like to get them back. If he makes me me more than to make him suffer. If he insults me, I'd love to insult him. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what in the eyes of everybody, if it's possible, and that's a good one, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Live at peace with everyone. Don't take revenge, my friends. but leave vengeance to God's wrath. It is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. Well, he didn't really mean this, I don't think. He had a little sign up on his gate in the back. He says, I don't get mad, I get even. well, he didn't mean that. It was a slogan. But, folks, are we living our lives that way? The main thing in my life is to protect myself. The main thing in my life is sure that if anybody mistreats me, that he gets. You see, I like justice. That's a bad word. I like justice for the other guy. I like to see the guilty person punished. So I like justice for the other guy. You know what I like for me? Grace. I like grace for me. I like forgiveness. Well, getting even is really not what it's all about. Getting even is not satisfying. Somehow or another, Paul says we need to learn to give room for God's wrath. You see, I don't know. I don't know what goods and bads always are. I told a story last Wednesday night. I'm going to retell. Some of you are here who were there Wednesday night. I warned you about this. I guess this story never happened, okay, but it does illustrate the point. There was a wealthy man in London, and one morning he was walking to work, and there was a little boy there who had a little shoe shine thing, a little box with a place to put your foot. This wealthy man wanted a shoe shine. He put his foot up there, and the little boy was shining his shoe, and the little boy was crying, and tears would drop on the shoe, and then he had to wipe them off and shine it up again. And this wealthy man said, he stomped his foot and he said, why don't you quit that? So what are you crying about? And the little boy, teary-eyed, he looked up at the man and he said, my mother died yesterday, and I'm trying to make enough money to buy a flower to put on her grave. That, in my mind, that totally changes the atmosphere of what's going on here. Now, the wealthy man didn't know the circumstances, and if the circumstances had been known, quite possibly he would have said, take your time, son, and here's something extra so you can buy a real nice wreath to put on your mom's grave. You see, these change the atmosphere that we're living in. Why? Give way to the wrath of God. Hey, listen, God's going to take care of those folks in whatever way is right and just and merciful. And you see, I'd like for God to take care of me that way, almost. What is merciful. But maybe I wouldn't like for God to take care of me on the basis of what's right and just. I want grace, not justice. And you know, the Bible is just full of stuff like that. It really is. It's just full of things like that. Where when we stop and think about the practicality of the slogans, bad word, but of the slogans that the Bible gives us, when we think of how practical they are, and we stop and think for a moment, wow, hey folks, this works. It's practical. It works every day. No, it doesn't work every single time. A soft answer is not always going to turn away wrath. But when we learn to live our lives according to these slogans, life will develop in a way we never supposed. In the rough places of life, we can find ways to overcome them. In the difficult places of life and the difficult people that we have to deal with, we can overcome them. When I lived in Tampa, Florida, I had a watch. It was a wind-up kind of watch. And I got it cleaned and paid for it. Next day, it quit running. I went back to the jeweler and I told him, you know, this is what's happened. And he said, he said to me, he said, well, yeah, I've got so many things ahead of you. It's going to be a couple of weeks before I can get back to this. And I said to him, I said, it's okay. I've got another watch. And he looked at me like, oh my, it's not what I expected. And then he smiled and he said, Mr. Burch, I'll have it for you tomorrow. You see, treating people, that's the only time that I can remember when I've treated somebody really right. Treating people the way we ought to treat people changes the whole atmosphere that's all around us. That's what Christ taught us about how to live. If you're not a Christian today, we're going to sing an invitation song that suggests the Master's call. If you would come to him this morning with faith in your heart, turn away from your sins, be baptized into Christ, put him on, and rise to walk in newness of life. If you're subject to the invitation, when you come, while we stand together and sing, please.